Okay, so it apparently tells me that I'm live. Yes, which I am. And I think it's a little bit lagged. However, I'm looking quite forward to today's podcast of Karim Talks About Economics. It's a little bit, maybe a little bit chaotic at the beginning because I'm a little bit rushed because I had to call this individual in already 1 minute. Okay, let's see. So apparently we're back at 10 seconds. Well, regardless, I'm going to repeat it again. Welcome to Karim Talks About Economics, episode number 14. Well, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. Maybe I can change it while doing this. Let's see. It'd be interesting if I could. It's a little bit rushed. However, I think everything should be in place now. Yes, I'll be calling him. Let's see if it changes. But yeah, welcome back to Karim Talks About Economics, which is a podcast where Karim, talks about economics. The idea is that this podcast is very spontaneous, it's informative, and it's open minded. It's spontaneous in the sense that um, it's there's not a lot of preparation that goes into this. However, there's a lot of spontaneous thoughts that come to play. And the idea is that we can converge whenever to talk about different subjects. It's informative in the sense that we try to be to have something of content, and we try also to be open-minded. I'm sorry for rushing the introduction very much. I can tell you much more about it. However, I will have to make my call now, and it's to our guest Hamid Reza, which is an individual that I actually worked with um, at Periscope when I was a student at Aarhus University. I'm just gonna call him now, and I have the phone on speaker, and just yeah, you can just follow along um, as it goes. Hello, hello, hi Hamid. uh, I can't hear you. Okay, so technical difficulties. So there's a little technical difficulties. I'm gonna end the call and then try to call you up again. Yes, I think that's yeah, yeah. I've had a wonderful day today. However, it's been a little long. I went to Lemby and the west coast of Denmark, and it was very, very, very windy. I can tell you that. So I'm gonna try to call him again. Hi, Hamid.
Hi.
Oh, how are you
Hi,
doing?
Karim. Good.
It's good to
How
hear.
are you?
Is it okay if I put you on speaker?
Yes, it's okay. No problem.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I had a visit by by my mother today, so that's why I had to postpone it half an hour. but, but
Okay.
yeah, I hope that's fine.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. So yeah, as I told you at the restaurant Wednesday, this call is towards making some content for Karim Talks About Economics, which is the podcast that I've started now that I'm done with studying economics. Um,
Yes.
the idea is that it is going to be spontaneous. So yeah, as you know, I have written to you a couple of topics that we can talk about. However, we might also talk about something else if you wish to do so. So
Yes.
yeah, there's no stringent or anything specific that you have to tell us. Just you being here is quite fascinating and interesting for me. Um, and then it's also informative in the sense that I want to learn a little bit about your life and your experience. And I will also be asking you, so you might also feel that it might be informative as you have to think about these things, or you're asked questions that you have not been asked before. Um, and and
Yes.
and finally, I try to be as open minded as anything. So I will not be bigoted. I will not see something from one perspective and then not be open to different interpretation of that situation or that thing. And I hope that you too will be open minded. And yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I suppose a good starting point, or yeah, a good starting point would be maybe the research. Um, what kind of, and because we know each other from the Strategic Foresight Research Network, it makes sense that that's where we start, right? That's where we first met each other.
Yes. I think the first I introduce myself.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
And
ah,
then
yes, of course, of course.
yes. Yeah. Then we can go to the next questions. Okay. I'm Hamid Reza. I come from Iran. I have been in Denmark since 4 years ago. I have an education in operation and production management PhD from my country, Iran. Ministry of Research and Education in Denmark has recognized my certificates. I was an assistant professor and researcher at Tehran University.
Yeah.
And I have more than 10 years experience as lecturer and researcher at Tehran University and other top universities in Iran. I have taught 10 topics such as research methods, operational research, or is a mathematical base in management, quantitative and qualitative methods in management, innovation management, statistics, project management, strategic planning, and organizing. And I have managed more than 30 scientific projects and 50 theses in Iran.
Okay. Yeah.
And also I have written 16 scientific papers in Persian and English and 10 books. And I am expert in SPSS, Lisrel, AHP, AMOS, MICMAC, and concept mapping, and another statistical software in management.
Yeah.
Because in Iran we use a lot of quantitative methods in our research.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And about why I am in Denmark. Yeah.
No, well, I thought we could first talk about like objectively, and then we could dive more deep into your and your specific situation.
Okay.
But yeah, I suppose you have already told us about your research and your accomplishments, which
Yeah.
I personally think are quite significant. However, if we can maybe discuss objectively, um, how is it different to do research in Denmark versus Iran?
Yes. The research process in Iran is similar to that in Denmark. It's no very difference in the process.
Okay.
But research in Iran is more quantitative than qualitative. And as I said before, we use a lot of software for analyze our data and analyze the results.
Yeah.
But in Denmark, I think the most of the research is qualitative, and I think in Iran is more quantitative than Denmark.
Okay.
Yeah, for example, for PhD thesis, we write a thesis, I think more than 400 pages with a lot of graphics and a lot of statistical analysis. But in Denmark, there's a very little, very small.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
It's 100 to 200 pages the maximum here in
Yes,
Denmark. But
yes,
but do you think that the quality is then different, or do you have
yes.
more time to write to the PhD in Iran?
Yes, in Iran we have 5 years
Ah, okay.
time to complete and finish the PhD.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think um, data in Denmark, because in Iran sometimes we don't have enough access to internet sometimes, and enough access to the sources because of the, for example, sanctions, for example, the political problem between Iran and USA. But in Denmark, we have access to any information, any data, and it's help to quality of the research in Denmark.
Yeah.
And we don't have this opportunity to Iran in Iran. Yeah, I remember in one of our project in Iran, we must use a source of information, but that time there was a problem between Iran and UK. I think some people in Iran attacked to the embassy of UK, and we couldn't download any paper in that period of time.
Okay. So what I hear is that the geopolitical atmosphere plays a huge impact on research
Yes.
or at least the access to information in Iran.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. But does these geopolitical conflicts also show themselves in the research that you do?
Yes.
So can you tell me a little bit about what kind of research? So you did mention a lot of topics at the beginning. I
Yes.
heard innovation,
In
strategic management. Yeah.
yes, I explained about one of them, and um, in 2005, I had designed a model for business excellence measurement as a business excellence diamond model in Iran. It was a model for organizational pathology and measuring excellence
Okay.
in a service organization in Iran. And it was a very good model in that time, and I had several lecture about this model in Iran and in UK also.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and
So
there's
2 seconds. You were free to travel from Iran, and
yes,
okay.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And if you know, we have a model in quality management as a EFQM, European Foundation for Quality Management. And my model in that time was better than the EFQM model, because my model can also do organizational pathology.
Okay.
And in the 2005, Ahmadinejad was president of Iran in that time. And someone from Ahmadinejad office called me and said the president wanted to have a meeting with you.
Mm-hmm.
At the meeting, he told me design a model for National Quality Award in Iran.
Oh.
I said, this is a good idea, and I started designing the model with a group of my colleagues and the students. And during this designing of model, what is the short period from for this designing, because I involved in a problem with political problem with Iranian regime, and I had to leave the project, and I can explain you why.
Yeah.
Yeah, but during this project, we needed information about, for example, National Quality Award of USA, National Quality Award of other countries, and we don't have enough access to the information for designing a overall and comprehensive model on that time.
Okay.
Yes. And I think we in now we have this the same problem in Iran, and most of my students send an email to me or call to me and ask me, you can send me send me a paper, an article for me, because we cannot access to this, for example, paper in Iran. Yeah. Okay. And sometimes government limited access to internet because they are worried about the information, and they are worried people access to information, and it's maybe affect on the behavior of young people in Iran, and they go and demonstrate against the regime.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that. In the news the last year, I suppose, and we've also seen it in a lot of countries surrounding Iran. That it is especially the youth that demonstrate against the government.
Yes.
Yeah. We even also see that in the US at this point, right? but that's maybe for some other reasons rather than access to information. Maybe it's discrimination against other groups. Yeah. So with all the information that you've given me here, it seems as if Iran, or at least the government of Iran, might have a hidden agenda with research. Is that how I should understand it, or do they let you research in whatever you want? However, it's in a limited sphere.
Yes, in Iran, government determine what domain you can go and research on it. And if, for example, we wanted in Iran to research on constraint theory, and we want to use constraint theory to process improvement in a company in Iran.
Yeah.
As you know, constraint theory is Israeli theory. Goldratt is the theory from Eliyahu Goldratt.
Okay.
And write a proposal. We wrote a proposal about this method, and we wanted to apply this method in that company, but one of the officer of intelligence service in Iran came to my office and said, you cannot use this method because this method is from Israel.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
but then it's really not only the government, but it's the people even doing research, because it seems that this is a technical method, right? And that
Yes.
individual would have to have read about it and know it, even.
Yes, and I wanted to, for example, taught this topic in my classes, and they said me, no, you cannot.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you. They said me, you can teach, but you cannot say who is
Yeah,
the presenter of this method.
yeah. So it would be
Yeah.
basically plagiarism, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But did you do it? Or what?
Yes.
Yeah, good. No, it's good because people need to know it, right? Even if they don't know who created it, at least they know that it exists,
Yes.
and you can move
Yes.
science forward. But do you then feel that science is moving forward, or do you feel like you're living in a black box when you're doing research in Iran?
Yes. In Iran, we have two type of people. You
Okay.
agree with the government, and everything they say, you say okay, and you have a good and very easy life. You have a lot of money and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say no to government, you have a lot of problem, like me.
Yeah.
If you remember, I explained you about the designing a model for a quality award in Iran. That
Yeah.
time, I said yes to Ahmadinejad, and I
Mm-hmm.
went to the president's office, and I started to design a model for quality award in Iran. But 6 months later, Ahmadinejad called me and said that it would be better to design a quality award model for the Islamic world instead of the national quality award
Ah,
model for Iran.
yeah.
I told him, no, it does not make sense because every country has its own model. He told me that is not my decision. It's the Ali Khamenei decisions.
Yeah.
And you have to say yes.
Yeah.
However, I said no. And this was the beginning of my problems and
Yeah.
conflicts with the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Okay. Yeah.
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 It's in Iran, we have a lot of problem in the research. We don't have freedom in research.
Mm.
If you research in the topic and the regime don't agree with this topic, you maybe have a lot of problem.
Yeah. However, you did say that um, um, yeah, when you had to do the business excellence measurement, right, for the service industry in 2005, you said quickly that you had also you've also met in conferences in the UK, and there I asked you, well, were you free to then go to conferences, and then you said quickly yes. Uh, how do these two go in line? That you're not allowed to do research, but you're allowed to go outside Iran and know about what's happening in conferences.
In 2005, it was the in 2005 it was the end of the president of Khatami, And during the Khatami period, Iran and European country had a good relation together. But from 2005, when Ahmadinejad became Iran president, we had a lot of problem with the European countries.
Yeah.
And when I went to the UK, but late of the Khatami period.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
And that time, embassy of UK was active in Iran.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's okay. So I had another interview with another researcher, and I did mention a little bit about it to you during the meeting, during our dinner Wednesday, and that was with my dad that said that of course research should not be limited by the personal characteristics of the individual, but rather the intelligence of the individual. However, he also said something else to maybe the way that research is limited, at least here in the West, and that is that it's a game of finding the funds, right? So, in order to be able to do research in Denmark, or he lives now in Saudi Arabia, so in Saudi Arabia, even, well, if you do research in this field, you're allowed to do research in whatever, right? But if you do research here, you will get funding. If you do it over here, you will not get funded, right?
Yes.
I feel that it's a little bit different in Iran. There is some real consequences if you then choose to not go in the right field. Is that correctly understood, or is it also with respect to funding?
Yes, it's okay, and it's correct. But difference is if you, for example, you do research in a topic here in Europe, maybe they don't pay you fund.
Yeah.
But if you do research on some topic in Iran, you maybe lose your life.
Yeah. 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 I see it. Yes. Yes. It's not a game of funding, it's a game of survival.
Yeah.
Yeah. But is it also run with funding in Iran, or is it then you get a salary and then that's it? Like
Iran for the PhD and master in Iran is free, and we have two type of universities in Iran: governmental university that are totally free, and you have not to pay anything, any money, and private university, and they are very expensive universities, and governmental university are much better than the private university in Iran.
Okay.
And in PhD, when you want to select subjects to research, they don't pay you anything because your education is free.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in Iran there are some companies, research company, and you as a student, PhD student, you are allowed to establish a company, a research company, and you can take a project from other factories and other companies, and you can make money for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a little bit different than here in Denmark. Yeah. Or here in Denmark,
Yes.
yeah. Or here in Denmark, you have to teach, right, to get the PhD funding. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. But in Iran, there's some difference.
yeah, yeah. But it's not really bad difference, right? Because you go out, you
Yes.
actually do a
And
real contribution to society while
yes.
you study.
Yes. And also in Iran, for research, we have to pay maximum 5 to 10% as tax,
Oh, yeah,
and it's very good. I manage more than 30 scientific projects in
yeah,
Iran because I had a company, a research company in Iran, and I had a very big project in
mm,
Iran in the different topics, and I made a lot of money in Iran.
yeah,
Yeah, but and I thought I can have the same company here in Denmark, and I established a research company as Nordic Business Excellence in 2017 in Denmark, but I had to close it in 2018 because of the tax problem in
yeah,
Denmark.
yeah. It's a little bit, it's a little bit different in Denmark.
Yeah.
Was that a big shock for you when you came to Denmark to look at uh, the taxes are so high, right? So you say that the university, or at least the public universities in Iran, was for free, so it's just like Denmark, right? However, you only paid
Yes.
5 to 10%. When you came to Denmark, you had to pay a lot more than that. Was that one of the big
Yes.
shocks, or did you have any other big shocks?
Excuse me.
Did, was that a big shock for you? The tax and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Because I used to pay, for example, uh, 5 to 10%
Mm.
tax, and here's for more than 36% tax, and it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
but in I asked from when I came to Denmark, I asked why in a lot of money we have to pay for tax, and they said me because hospital is free in Denmark,
Mm.
and I said them we have also free hospital in Iran.
Yeah.
And we only pay 5 to 10%. But there's difference between Iran government and Denmark government. In Iran, you pay 5 to 10% as tax, but you don't know where is your money because
Mm.
Iran regime pay your money to buy weapon to Bashar Assad in Syria,
Mm.
pay your money to Hezbollah, and we cannot see the effect of our money in Iran. But in Denmark, you pay a lot of money, but you can see the result of them in the society.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a question of transparency.
Yes. Yes. In Iran, we have a lot of petroleum and a lot of money, but more than 70% of people in Iran are poor, and
Mm.
they have a very bad life quality in Iran. Why? Because government of Iran don't spend doesn't spend money for the people of Iran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about a political game that they are playing
Yes.
with their neighbors.
Yes. They invest a lot of money to make missiles
Yeah.
and nuclear bombs and weapons
Okay. So
instead of pay to people.
yeah. So yeah, the nuclear thing, right? You said that. I don't know how. Yeah. since I'm trying to be as open as possible. Um, Now, of course, the government is denying it, but is there propaganda in Iran for the population of Iran that they are actually pursuing this?
Yeah, but most of the people in Iran are disagree with this military policy in Iran,
Mm,
and in the we had a very big demonstration
yeah.
in November in Iran, and most of the people come out of their houses and say, "We don't want nuclear bombs. We
Mm,
want to ordinary life, and we want to be in the life in the peace."
yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's very clear. Um, yeah, and I've met you. I know how friendly you are. Like really, you are the most kind person I've ever met in my life. I think.
thank you very much.
I really think so. Um,
Thank you.
okay, so this is something that I wanted to have at the very end, but I think it's maybe a good time to have it now, and it's maybe why Iran has moved towards that, and if you can, and of course we kind of know why Iran is developing these weapons. That's because it has enemies surrounding it, right? And here especially Iraq, and I think that when you were young, right, when you were maybe my age, there was a war between
Yes.
Iraq and Iran. And how was that experience? And yeah,
Yeah, it was a very, very bad experience. And I lost five of my very good friends
oh,
because when Iran and Iraq, we have the war between Iraq and Iran.
yeah,
I was, I think, 10 years old.
mm,
Yeah, 10 years old. And we have a lot of bombing in Tehran, and we lived in the near of the Tehran as Karaj as a city, and we have 8 years war from when I was 10 years to I was 18,
yeah,
and my best period of life, we have a lot of stress,
yeah,
and we thought maybe this night the airplane of Iraq come and bomb our house,
yeah,
and sometimes we had to go to the we made a safe house in
yeah,
our garden, and sometimes we go there and we slept there because there was the more safe and than our house.
yeah,
Yeah, and I remembered we couldn't go to a school because uh, Saddam
mm,
uh, uh, shoot missile from Baghdad to Tehran,
yeah,
and yeah, and this was a very, very, very bad experience. When I remember it, I be very sad.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's understandable. It's from 10 to 18 years. Well, that's the period where you kind of that's the most important part of schooling. That's where you develop the main tools that
Yes.
you'll be using for the rest of your life. Uh,
Yes.
but however, come on, look at yourself. PhD and 30 projects. Ah, come on, you
Yeah.
did quite well.
Yeah. But that was a very bad period for all of
Yeah,
the people of Iran.
yeah,
We, uh,
yeah,
and and now I understood the Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, was the creator of this war in that period, because he had a speech against Saddam Hussein and said Baas party go out of their house in Baghdad and demonstrate against Saddam Hussein. And it was the start of the war between Iran and Iraq.
Yeah.
And I think we have the same problem in these years. And again, there is a risk of war between Iran and the USA, or Iran and Israel, maybe.
You think they could do something towards Israel?
Yes, because if you heard the news, two of the nuclear factories in Iran had problem and bombed in Natanz. And one of my friends from Iran said me they heard a very loud explosion, and they heard it was from Israel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think we are in the very dangerous situation between Iran and Israel, and Iran and USA in this time.
I definitely agree with you, especially maybe with changing the capital. Yeah, well, they are thinking about changing the capital, but at least the U.S. changing its embassy to Jerusalem, which I think is kind of symbolic. Let me pick your mind on Turkey. Because Turkey has made the exact same thing, right? As we saw in the news, I suppose yesterday and today, also with the chapel that the church that they changed into a mosque.
Hagia Sophia.
Hagia Sophia, yes. So do you think that Turkey is also playing games, or what is what are they thinking?
I think Erdogan is like the Ahmadinejad in Iran. Both of them, they don't have a rational behavior. And I think Turkey involved in the demonstration or some problem with people. One of my friends lives in Turkey, and he said me the people in the Turkey, some of the people in Turkey, they don't agree with Erdogan politics, and they think Erdogan is not a very good president for Turkey.
I know that that at least, well, I also follow up with the news, at least from the Egyptian perspective, right? And we at least don't like that he's interfering in Libya. That is not something that we're glad to see, because it's just being escalated further than it's supposed to be.
For General Haftar,
Yeah.
And do you know Iran pay a lot of money to General Haftar? And Iran sent a weapon to him.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing to hear that. Um, as you said, 70% of the population may be poor in Iran. However, they are sending money outside Iran, even though
Yes,
they're
yes.
also enclosed, right, and have all of these political, economical difficulties. Uh, so,
Yeah.
yeah,
I have a friend, he's from Lebanon and he lives in Aarhus. He said me, I have two uncles and they are member of the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and
yeah.
they only go 2 or 3 days on week to their job, and
Oh,
Iran pay a lot of money to them, and they have especially a car, and they have a special card as a Hezbollah card
okay.
that
Yeah.
this card charged from Iran, and they can go to the shop and buy everything they want,
Okay.
and
But
Iran pay.
yeah, but I don't think that's. Hopefully, that will not last because you also see some demonstrations in Lebanon, right? At this
Yes,
point, they had a pause here with the corona, but now they're back on the streets. Um,
yes, yes.
and yeah, I can tell you from an economic standpoint, it doesn't make sense to continue that way. You need at least a balanced public budget, right? that's
Yeah.
that's the first part of it. Um, uh, but if we can go back to after the war, did you feel that there was a change in the government and the way that politics was done in Iran when you had turned the 18 years old?
Yes, after finished the war between Iran and Iraq, there was a big change because after 1 year, Khomeini died, and Hashemi Rafsanjani that time became Iran's president, and he had a very open mind, and he wanted to have a good relation with all of the world. And
Yeah,
I remember in the period of Hashemi Rafsanjani, we had very good life in Iran, and we had enough money, and everything was okay in that time. But after 4 years, Khamenei, as a leader of Iran, they decide in everything. One person decide for 80 million persons in Iran, and he interferes in all thing in Iran, and he uh, said to Hashim Rafsanjani to change his politics about relation with the another country. And after 4 years, we had another problem in Iran.
yeah,
I think the main problem in Iran is the leader of Iran, Khamenei. If he died or changed, I think it's better for Iran.
yeah,
And I heard Qasem Soleimani, he was a big general in Iran and
yeah,
died by USA.
yeah,
They, Qasem Soleimani and 2 or 3 other people in Iran, they had a team and they wanted to um, change Khamenei as a leader of Iran. And after Khamenei heard about it, Qasem Soleimani died suddenly.
hmm.
Mm. And somebody says he's political agreement between Iran and USA. John Bolton deleted from the political in US, and Qasem Soleimani deleted from Iran.
Yeah. So you're saying that it might be an inside job, that it's not a
Yeah.
it's not a big deal that he's dead, because the Iranian government wanted him out of the picture.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not that big of a win, I suppose, into a different regime.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's stop talking about war. Let's talk about maybe why you came to Denmark, and how you reinvented yourself when you came to Denmark. You can tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, when I came to Denmark, I applied for job in the Denmark industry, and I applied for several companies, and I sent my CV, and they invited me to interview and said, "Oh, you have a very good and very strong CV," and finally they selected another person again instead of me. In one of employers, I said, ask him, why you said me you are you have a very good CV, and why you select another people instead of me? Yeah. And he said me, even if you were more capable, we would prefer to hire, for example, Michael, than someone with an Arabic name. And I said, why? There's no difference between people. And he said, in Denmark, prefer to select people from Western to Eastern. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I prefer to establish my company in 2017, and as I mentioned before, I had to close it in 2018 because of tax problem, and I decided to continue and my education in engineering, in innovation engineering at Aalborg University, and then I couldn't find a job as a researcher in Aarhus University.
Yeah.
And I think again to establish another company because now I am familiar with the rules in Denmark, and I think if this time I establish my own company, I will be success.
I'm sure of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but remember the taxes this time, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is really difficult to take care of taxes here in Denmark, because there's so many laws about it.
Yeah.
And there's many exemptions, right? So if you do this, well, then you can get 5% off, right? You can get the first 30,000 off and things like that. And yeah, I think in Denmark it's made such that you actually would need a lawyer or something, or at least someone that knows about taxes in order to be able to do it.
Yes.
It's very interesting to hear that you're still motivated, right? And what is it that drives this motivation, if I can ask you?
Yeah, I have to children.
Yeah.
They are 18 and 7 years old. And they like to live in Denmark, especially my older son. He said me, I never come back Iran, and I don't want to go to another country.
Yeah.
I prefer to stay in Denmark because I like Denmark, and because of my family, I want to start a new business and make them a very good life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's understandable.
And I think it's the big motivation driver for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I really love your story. It's amazing.
Thank you very much.
Do you feel that is there anything in particular that you've changed about yourself when you came here to Denmark? And I know it's a very broad question, but yeah.
Yes, I think I when I came to Denmark, I feeling the real freedom in Denmark, and I can devoted my time to because in Iran I was very busy. And I have I went to the workplace 6 days in the week, and I only was on Monday I was home.
Okay.
But here in Denmark, in the first 2 years, I always was home, and I had enough time to study about the different thing, and I think that time in these 2 years helped me to find another ability in myself, and I could plan for another improvement in my life, and
Yeah.
I could write a English book about organizational pathology, and I wanted to send it to publish in Germany.
Oh.
Yeah, because the company in Germany, I had a paper in the organizational pathology, and that company in Germany, I don't know where, but they saw my paper, and they sent me email and said me, if you want to publish your research, we are ready to invest in your publication.
Okay.
And I said, yes, why not?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also in this period, I had several political interview with some of the TV and radio, Persian radio and Persian TV. They are working out of Iran, for example, in USA and in UK, and against regime.
Okay.
Yeah.
It-
It's dangerous, but I like it. I want to fight for free Iran.
yeah, that's
We have a very good.
Yeah.
We have a very good people in Iran, and Iranian people are very good people, but we don't have good government. And there is a group in Europe. It's an Iranian group. They are fighting for free Iran, and I am a member of them. And we are planning to change regime in Iran.
Also a coup. A coup. Yeah, but yeah, but okay. So in Egypt, for instance, the military is very strong, right? And it's always the military that kind of controls the country because at some point, yes, we had the Arab Spring demonstrations in 2011, and then we had a presidential election where someone was elected, but 2 years later he was removed from office and a military individual came in place.
Yes.
What in Iran it doesn't seem like it's the military people that control the country, but who is it that kind of control the country then?
Yes. In Iran, SEPA is a military. They manage the country, and Ali Khamenei is controlled by this military group. They decide for everything. They investment in everything. They produce bomb. They produce missile and everything in Iran. They decide who can be president. They decide who can be, for example, foreign ministry of Iran, and everything is for SEPA.
Okay.
But in the when you see Iran, you think in Iran we have a republic, yeah, and we have election, but it's, everything is for show.
Yeah.
In the real, the SEPA decide for everything, decide for who can be president, who can be everything in Iran. For example, in university, they limited my career plan because I don't cooperate with them, and they said me, you cannot be associate professor in Iran because they said me you had a political interview with a newspaper in Iran and with TV, and they said me if you go ahead and criticize the government and leader, we arrest you. And they limited my career path. I could be promoted from assistant professor to associate professor, but they opposed my promotion. And they said me, no, you cannot. They can decide in everything you think.
Okay. Yeah.
It's very bad situation. Very bad situation.
Yeah. But I suppose you're hopeful. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, my classmate in Iran was my boss in Iran. Why? Because he was a member of SEPA. Just for this one, and just he was a member of SEPA. He was my boss.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, there are two types of people in Iran. Those who follow and say yes, they have an easy life and they will earn a lot of money. And then there are those who stand up and want to make a change.
Yes.
But what? Yeah, it's a little bit of a dumb question. But what motivates you and makes you want to make a change in Iran? while you know that if you had just said yes, uh, and I know it's yeah, it seems like you would have had a pretty good career.
Yeah, if I said to them yes, I had everything, and I could promote, and I could have everything I wanted. But
Mm.
I say no to them because I didn't want to sell myself, and my freedom. For example, when you say yes, you have to follow all of their policy and procedure. You have to go to the mosque. You have to go to the pray, and you have to have the birth, yeah, and mustache.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And I and I hasn't.
Yeah, you don't have a beard, no, or
Yeah, yeah.
mustache.
And also that time I hadn't. And they said me,
Oh,
if you had a bird, you can promote faster. And I said, no, I don't want.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they said me, you have to go to the mosque for the prayer for other people in the mosque, and one of the government pressed come to the university and prayer for us.
Yeah.
And they said me, you have to go. And I'd say no, because my students come to my office for their thesis and their problems, and it's better I sit in my place. And if I want to pray, I can pray in my office.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
But they don't agree with me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I have too many questions, but I wanna dig a little bit deeper, because I'm still young, right? And this saying yes and having everything, well, at some point it must have seemed, and of course I don't know your background. I don't know if you already have a lot of money and your family is quite rich, but for some, I suppose at the beginning of their career, it seems very, very promising. It's something that, yes, I'm gonna do this if you can give me a villa, if you can give me a car, if you can give me a summer house, right? And so,
yes,
some people would be willing to do it.
I had everything in Iran. I had tree houses, car, everything in Iran. But it was from my efforts, and
Yeah.
I took project from other companies, because I had a self company in Iran.
Yeah.
But and other people can say yes to regime. Regime give them houses, cars, money, without any effort.
Yeah. Hmm.
For example, they said me, I had a meeting in interview in television about economical situation in Iran in 2008. And when I went to the TV, there was two people from intelligence service in Iran, and they said me, if you have something against the regime, you have a lot of problem,
Hmm.
and you can only explain about how everything is good, everything is okay in Iran, and so on. And I could go to TV and say everything is good, and after the interview, they pay me a lot of money, but I went to the TV and said on the real. And after that, I had to go to the intelligence service of Iran, and they asked me why you said something like this in the TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it goes easy. A little bit, you know.
You can say yes and have everything, or vice versa.
Yeah. For me, it's a little bit weird, and now I've been in Denmark. I've lived in Denmark nearly my entire life, right? However, for me, it goes a little bit. It's a little bit difficult to understand how you can be promoting an Islamic agenda and also be willing to lie, right? Because those things go very much against each other.
Yes, Hassan. In Iran, we have a totally different life. We have a real life in our houses. Okay.
Yeah.
In our houses, people can drink, can dance, can do everything. But out of the house, you have to pray. You have to go to the mosque. You have to respect to the regime and so on. It's a totally different life in Iran. For example, I had a friend, and when we went to his home, you can find, for example, the picture of Shah. Before the Islamic Republic of Iran, we had Shah in Iran, and he had a very good relation also with Egypt in that time. And when he went out of house, he had the picture of Khamenei with himself.
That's quite funny.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't have, and I don't have this personality.
Yeah,
I cannot sell myself for money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a picture. I will send you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my picture with the president of Iran and in the team. I easily can say, okay, I will design a national quality award for Islamic world, and I could take a lot of money and make a lot of money in that period. But I say no, and another person went and do, and never they couldn't use that model, because there is difference between there's difference between Islamic world. We have the Shia, Sunni, and there's a unusable model. They paid a lot of money, but this model couldn't use anywhere.
Yeah. What do you think the goal of the Iranian government is? Or yeah, government or the parliament, or yeah.
Yeah. In this time, we have the very bad situation in Iran. We have several problems. For example, USA sanctions. It's very hard sanction, and they cannot sell petroleum, and they have to go in the open seas and sell petroleum illegally. And it's not, they cannot make a lot of money. and otherwise, and also we have problem for COVID-19 in Iran.
Mm.
We have, I think, more than in the formal reports in Iran, more than 12,000 people died in Iran because of the COVID-19. It's the formal reports. In the informal reports, near to 60,000 people died in Iran because of the COVID-19. And it's a very bad situation in Iran, and most of the industries closed, bankrupt, and they have a lot of problem. And in this situation, government and parliament try to save Iranian regime. Therefore, they decide to make an agreement between Iran and China, a 25 years agreement. And this agreement, and most of the people are disagree with this agreement between Iran and China. They want to allow China to invest in all thing in Iran, and they want to give an island in Iran as Kish to China. China wants to come to China and invest there, and they want to, and they want to allow China to come to military of Iran and invest in military of Iran. And I think it's very bad situation for Iran now.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird, but well, if they can't trade with the U.S., then they will trade with China.
Yes.
But
yes.
but China is not is not a good country to trade with, because especially also with the Islamic perspective, right? We
yes,
also see
yes.
what they are doing towards the Muslims in the West China, right?
Yeah, Uyghur
Yeah,
people. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So it's a little bit weird to see Iran, or to hear your experience from Iran, because I of course don't know as much as you, that they are now both, they want an Islamic country. However, they are lying about the real situation, right? And knowingly so. And they also want to trade with a country, China, that is not treating Muslims good.
yes. They want to pay and give opportunity to all countries only for save their regime.
Yeah.
They, yeah, and support of Islamic people, it's only for show in Iranian regime. They only want to save their regime, because demonstrates in Iran every day is broader, and the regime knows their fail down is very near.
Mm.
And they want to uh, be in Iran for several years more, and they are ready to pay everything: money, petroleum, Iran island to the China, only for they support Iran in the UN and something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really not a good situation. I'm gonna ask you a specific question. So well, now we know that Iran is trying to be an Islamic country, but is it then also Islamic banking? that is, well, do you follow the Islamic banking then in Iran also, or is that
Yes, but it's
free?
only on the name we have Islamic banking, but
Mm,
in the real, we don't have Islamic banking in Iran. People in Iran have to pay a lot of rent.
mm. Interest,
Yeah,
yes.
if one people in Iran need to, for example, a loan,
Yeah,
he has to pay a lot of rent,
yeah.
and it's not Islamic banking.
No,
And
no, that's
also
not. Yeah.
Islamic insurance. When I was in Iran, I had a research about takaful
Yeah.
in Islamic insurance or takaful, and we don't have takaful in Iran
Hmm. Interesting.
because because um, um, in Iran, in the name Iran is Islamic country, but in the action, in the act, no, we don't have Islamic banking, we don't have Islamic insurance, nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel that that's something that can stay on for a long time, or is there a natural end, or will they be always be able to find somehow a way to maintain uh, this kind of government?
I think Islamic Republic of Iran um, will be finished very soon, and because all the country in the Middle East, I think all of the country in the Middle East, they don't agree with the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Iran don't have good relationship with Saudi Arabia, with Emirat, with Kuwait, and another country. Just Iran have a good relation with Qatar.
Yeah.
Yeah? And in the world also, we don't have a good relation with USA and European country, and Iran only have China and Russia,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think they don't have people with them in Iran. Yeah? Most of the people in Iran are disagree, and they are unsatisfied with Islamic Republic of Iran. They in the 1979, when Khomeini wants to come to Iran, they said a very good thing, peaceful, justice, and everything. But in the real, people cannot see any justice. Some of the people in Iran have a very good life, a lot of money, very expensive car, very expensive houses, but most of the people don't have a bread to eat.
Yeah.
And it's a very big difference between the people in Iran.
Yeah. So.
And yeah, and people in Iran ready to go out and demonstrate again.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think after the Corona problem, we have a very big demonstration in Iran. In the November we had a very big demonstration in Iran, and the Islamic Republic of Iran killed 1,500 persons in 3 days. It's a lot of people.
That is very very much a lot,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's unnecessary. and it's
Yeah,
unnecessary in my perspective. Um,
yeah,
Especially if these people are just peacefully protesting. Um,
yeah. They only come, go out of their home and to say everything, why everything is very expensive and we don't have any money to living.
yeah,
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 but they killed them.
yeah, yeah. So you said previously that 70% of the population approximately are poor, and then of course you have some that are living pretty good. So that gets me thinking that there is a lot of disparity in the society. So
Yes,
so hmm, the question and therefore in economic terms I would expect that the Gini coefficient is quite high, and I think I've just checked it and it's 40, according to the World Bank estimate in 2016, which is quite high compared to Denmark that is at 24 or 28. um, so it's kind of the double, but regardless, you also said that the university is for free, right? And since the university is for free, I also suppose that primary education is for free. So how come this disparity still exists? Because we know normally that people with high education, well, they tend to get a higher wage in the labor market.
yes. In Iran, university is free, but we have a very hard examination for entrance to the university,
Okay.
and you can find a good job after your graduation if you had good relationship with the regime, because in Iran we have a team as a selection team in the intelligence service of Iran, and they decide this person is good and can go to the work, or he is not good or she is not good, and then she cannot find any job.
Oh.
The unemployment rate in Iran in the graduated people is very high because most of the people cannot find a good job for themselves.
Because of this selection team that exists.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, and they have to know, for example, another one in the company, or you have to pay a lot of money to one of these people in this selection committee, and after that you can find a job.
Oh.
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah. It's very difficult. And for example, I have a cousin in Iran. He is a PhD student and he's very talented, and he has written, I think, more than 10 scientific paper in the very good journal, but he has not job. And I say, why? And he said, they don't select my.
Yeah.
Because he don't have good relation with the regime.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
You have to go to the mosque. You have to go. You have to have some bears and go to the some political parties and have a good relation with the SEPA, and then you can find a good job.
Yeah.
When I was young, the situation was better, and I could find a job, for example, in the university. But now, situation is much worse.
Well, well, of course it will be worse if it's not the talent of the individual that is allowed to be shown, and what And in economics we call it the free market powers, right? If they are not allowed to work, then yeah, of course you will have a country that it will get worse with time, right?
Yeah, and but there are some private company,
Yeah.
and people can find job in the private company, but the number of private companies in Iran is limited, because the most part of the economic and the factories in Iran are governmental factory, and now are military factory, because SIPA um, mm, bought all of these factories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you
In
then? Yeah.
It's very fun. For example, when you want to go to a university in Iran, okay, you have an interview, and in interview, two people from intelligence service come in the meeting, and one from regional police in the university. Police, we have a regional police in university. They have an agent, and they come to the meeting. And for example, instead of they ask, for example, please introduce and say what is lean production. Okay, they ask about. Can you explain about the war between Muhammad and, for example, in the 1,400 years ago? You can explain about the war Hussein and Yazid in Karbala, and so on.
Yeah. So
you have to, you have to have a lot of information about religions instead of your field.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and if you consider the president of Iran and his ministers, you can see, for example, one of them is for example, Ministry of Economic, but he hasn't any education in economic. For example, he is graduated from the Islamic school in Iran, and he studied about Islamic management, for example, and he now is the minister in Iran. And most of the people he graduated in economy are unemployment.
Yeah.
I had a organizational pathology in a big company in Iran. It was a governmental company, and they have a lot of problem in the HR, human resource, in that company. And we used the business excellence diamond model for pathology in that organization, and I found HR has a lot of problem. and I taught the manager of HR in this huge organization must graduated in management or economic or something like this.
Yeah.
When I had an interview with that manager, I understand he is graduated in the Islamic uh, issues. I think so. In this and he didn't know anything about HR.
Okay.
Yeah, and he said me, yes, I come here only for my commitment to the regime.
That's
And that
really crazy to hear.
yeah, and it's a lot of problem in the system in Iran.
I suppose when we talk about HR, I don't know how much that's talked about in Iran, but here in Denmark, it's a big thing. It's the equality between men and women, right?
Yeah,
I know from my father that, for instance, in university, um, he also women are also of course get university degrees. However, they are in different sections, and something that's quite weird for me is that when he gives them presentations, he cannot see the women, right? So he's in a
yeah.
different room than them. Uh, how is it in Iran? You're also an academic, and you've also taught at the university. Let's start there and then move into if they are part of society.
Yes, we have women in Iran University, and they are very talented. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the number of women in Iran University is more than the boys.
Okay.
Yeah, and but they have a problem when they graduated. They cannot find a good job if they hadn't good hijab during their education. Yeah,
Really?
hijab. Yeah, hijab in Iran is mandatory, and if you during your education, if you hadn't good hijab after graduation, there is a report from the Islamic police in the university about, for example, that girl, and they wrote she didn't have good hijab during her education in the university, and it's a very bad point. And she couldn't find a good job in the governmental organizations.
Yeah.
Mm.
But is that only when they want to work in the public sector, or is it also
Yeah,
in the private sector?
no, in public sector is no problem. For example, my wife uh, was a lecturer at university,
Okay.
and yeah, and sometimes she went to university, and she, for example, she used to have a hijab, but if you this if her hijab go a little and somebody could see her hair, yeah,
Yeah.
and he had a lot of problem. She had a lot of problem, and two times Islamic polity in university said her, why you don't have very good hijab.
Yeah.
And at least, and finally, she had to leave the university.
Oh my God. So it went
Yeah,
even to that extreme measure.
yeah, because hijab in Iran is mandatory, and most of the girls in Iran have this problem in the selection process. If you remember, I said we have a selection team in
Yes.
the intelligence service in Iran, and if they don't verify that girl, she cannot find a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
If well, you said that in the private sector it's a little bit easier for people after they graduate, or at least in this case, as we discussed, for women to find a job without considering the hijab rule, uh, or law. It's not a rule; it's a law. Um, but if the unemployment is quite high in Iran, at least for these newly graduated individuals,
Yeah.
well, is there a limitation for the private companies then? Because I would naturally assume that if you can't find a job in the public, well, at some point you would be willing to do it in the private sector, right? Especially also when there is a tax incentive and the taxes are only at 5 or 10%.
Yeah. Now they had to have to find a job in the private sector. But as I mentioned previously, in Iran, the number of the private company is limited, and most of the girls after graduation are unemployment,
Yeah.
and they only wait to find someone to marry with them. And I remember in one of my class I had in class my class for 30. I had 30 gay students in my classes,
Okay.
and in one of this session I saw my students mm, are very sad, and I said her, why you are very sad? And she said me, I try find a good job because my family need to I find a job to support them, but I couldn't find a good job, and I have a lot of problem, and I uh, don't have to motive to uh, continue my education, because I finished my education. What happened?
Yeah.
I couldn't find any job. I
Yeah.
cannot find any job, and why I go ahead in my education?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah. My question um, what was, well, it's firstly it must have been very bad to go through that experience, right? Especially also with her professor, and she might even have been a good student, right? But only because of this selection team she could not get a job afterwards, and she would have to move into a different direction with marriage.
Yeah.
uh, but but I was more after why there is not a lot of private companies in Iran.
No, because mm, the government is um, most of the economic sector in Iran are governmental sector, And if you, as a investor, you want to invest in a company, and you want to establish a economical or a factory, for example. First of all, you have to go to this intelligence service in Iran, and they must verify you. And after that, you can establish the company. And when you establish company, there's a lot of the call, for example, to you, and they say you have to hire my friend, you have to hire my daughter, you have to hire my cousin, for example, and you have to select all these people to your organization, and there's no enough place for another one. For example, my friend has a company in Iran, and he produces saffron. And more than 50% of his personnel in Iran are from one person advice to hire. And for example, from the SEPA, from the another parliament, for example, he's a representative in the parliament, and he called to the manager of that company, you have to select or hire my friend.
I can see how that can be ruining for a private business.
And if you say no, then you have a lot of problem, and maybe your business be closed. Or maybe maybe you die in an accident.
Okay.
And I don't know why. 10 years ago, the government of Iran imported meat from Brazil. I think this meat was expired and is not good for people to eat it. And one of the lecturer at the University of Tehran, I think so, he said, I will say the reality to the people. And he in the driving from university to home, okay, and one truck killed him in the accident.
Oh my God.
And after that we understood it said this the track was a track from intelligence service in Iran. We have a lot of problem in Islamic Republic of Iran.
I can definitely hear that. It's been 2 hours nearly, and it's been lovely to have you. Are you willing to go further, or do you think it's too late and you want to go to bed? Or because I can stay here and listen to your stories forever if it had to be.
And thank you very much. You called me, and I had a good interview with you. I uh, believe you, and I think and I believe you will be very, very success in the world.
Well, thank you very
You are
much.
very talented, very clever, and I proud of you.
Thank you very much. And that is only because I try to surround myself with with people that I can learn from. Um,
Yeah, I can imagine you as a president of the Egypt.
it's quite a big
Why
honor,
not?
but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would be willing to take that because it's a big responsibility. It
Yeah.
definitely is.
But
Yeah.
if someday you become president of Egypt, remember
Yeah.
my word.
Definitely, definitely. You were the first to say it. You were the first to say it. Do you have any final remarks? Any final motivation? And also before that, uh, can I interview at a different time? Also, maybe I will develop some new
Yes,
questions out of
yes,
all of these things that we've talked about.
yes. Every time you want, I'm at your service.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
yeah.
And I heard two or three of your podcasts. That's
Oh,
wonderful. I like it.
which ones did you hear, if I may ask?
Number one and number two.
Okay. Yeah, so it's the one where
Yeah,
I just talk to the camera and read out from a book.
yeah. But it was very good for me
Ah,
because
okay.
yeah, it can promote my information
Yeah. Well,
about economy.
yeah, that's also the point of it. That's also the point of it. Um, but yeah, I think finally, do you have any final remarks, any final motivation that you want other people that may in the future listen to this podcast that they can learn from?
Yes, I want to say the other people they can join your podcast and support you
Yeah.
because I think your idea is very good and it can help to researcher to know about uh, the different issues in during the research process, and they can also be familiar with the topics in the economy, and it's very good for their research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can you give a motivation to people to keep on and whenever it's difficult for them just to keep on because it is going to be good at the end as experienced by yourself. Yeah, I'm pushing you towards a direction, but I'm so sorry. But you are, yeah, you have such a great story.
Yeah, I think your podcast can help to researcher to come to your podcast and say about their experience in
Yeah.
the research in the different um, um, problem and their experience, and it's a very good place for this exchange of the ideas between different people. And during this podcast, I can one can find a good idea for the new research, and I think it's very good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Hamid, thank you very much for participating in the podcast. And
You're welcome.
this is called podcast number 14. And
Okay.
usually when I have someone that I interview, I also try to summarize the things that we've talked about. Uh, but I think since this podcast is already nearly 2 hours long,
Yeah.
I will be summarizing it tomorrow. So
Okay.
you'll be able to see this podcast number 14 and number 15 also.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, if you wanted to share it with other people also.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Have a lovely evening and a lovely night with your family, and have a lovely weekend, and take
Thank
care
you
of
very much.
yourself,
Same to you.
and I hope I see you soon again.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We miss you
I miss you
at
too.
the workplace. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was Hamid Reza, which is one of the people that I came to know from working at Aarhus University at the Periscope group. However, because as you could hear, he had this much great of a profile, and his talents should not go to waste. He helped more on the research background of the group, rather on working on this rather simple things that we other student assistants worked on. As I told Hamid over the phone, I might not be summarizing the discussion that we've had with Hamid um, in this podcast, but rather in podcast number 15, and that is not only because the podcast here has become very long, but also because there's so much to talk about, right? So I could make it the first half of next podcast, or even the entire podcast next time. Let's see tomorrow on that. When I come back, we're gonna take the news, um, as we did not take it at the beginning, and but before that, as per usual, a little minute or two break while I go to the bathroom. See you in a minute. Okay, so I am back, and I'll now be switching the camera so you can see me. Or yeah, I should probably have made it such that I can share my screen with you directly, which I'll be doing momentarily. There we go. So yes, before thank Hamid Raza a lot for him willing to discuss or first of all to being with me on the podcast. Secondly, for being so open and so informative, and also being willing to answer questions that he had not prepared. So right, so being spontaneous, the three characteristics of this podcast. It's very informative things that he has discussed with us, and I really want to get down to it. But however, the podcast is already 2 hours, and that's kind of the cutoff. So I think it's time to go to the news, and as per usual, we look at COVID-19 to begin with, and you can see here that we're now, and that is 2 hours ago, around 2 hours ago, 12,735,000 cases, which is a yeah quite a large number. It's yeah, as we said, it's the record. Um, Yesterday was the record. I think today we might even set a new record, but let's see. If you look at the death rate, it's about 10,000 an increase, so it might have increased a little bit more than we wanted, which of course is given due to this lag. If we look at the number of seriously critical of the active cases, it's still at 1%, and the death rate of the closed cases is at 7%. That means that the percentages have not increased, however, the numbers might have increased. That's a good thing so far. Um, yes. Now, considering the specific numbers of the different top 20 countries, we see that the US hit a new record, 71,000 for one day, nearly 72,000 for one day. However, the death rate is lower than yesterday, at least. Brazil, death rate is higher, and the number of new cases is kind of the same as the one yesterday and the one before that. Let's see actually how it will be tomorrow due to the weekend. It would be interesting to see if it's lower. India has increased slightly by 2,000. Death rate is insignificant. Now we discovered that Mexico has a very high death rate. It's continuously quite high, and the new cases is also quite high. If we look at South Africa, new cases, I think this is a record. Death rate is not significant. Might change, however, right? If now we had Hamid Reza on the phone with us, the podcast with us today, and he did say the 12,000, right? But that's the official number, and he said that the hidden number might be much more different, and that yeah, that's something that you can think about, right? What is the real number? Will we ever know the real number? That's another good question. And still the ranking is that Canada is at number 20, followed by Colombia and France and Bangladesh, Germany, Turkey, things like that, right? So that's about Corona itself. Let's look at the news, see if there's something significant. Again, Bloomberg. So there's now talk about economic recovery, and you can see here a picture of the stock market. It might be that the stock market is now coming back to reality. However, that is of course not something that we can say on a Saturday. We can say about discussions that are being made behind the scenes. However, we know that the Tesla stock has hit 1,500, right? Which is a crazy number. So it's said that it has increased by around, yeah, I'm not going to say percentage because I have a number in my head that I've read somewhere, but I'm not sure of it. However, I think it has increased quite significantly this year in 2020, where the sales are supposed to be low, right? It gets you thinking: is there really this difference between the real economy and the stock or the equity market? Well, only time can show, and we at least for now know that yes, there is a significant difference. But should this significant difference continue to exist or not? That's a question that we'll know. Okay. If you look at the CNN, uh, there's a lot of critique about Trump. So that tells us that there's nothing significant really happening because we know that CNN might be a little bit biased, right? And I could also have had Fox News, as I've said multiple times. Fox News is just too biased sometimes, and today it was not worth having it. Was it worth having the BBC, the CNN? Well, not today, but yeah, at least we have something new here. Which was also in the news yesterday, right? That the European Union might be taking a stand against the decisions of the American president and the American strategy to tackle the Corona crisis. Um, it is taking a stand um, in the sense that, firstly, it has it has made travel by U.S. citizens not allowed. Well, U.S. citizens are not allowed to enter the European Union uh, for non-essential travel. So that's the first step that they are taking. And now they might be taking other steps, or at least this news gives us this idea, right? But let's see how it works because we know that the U.S. is buying up things currently, and they will be buying up vaccines. And we also, from previous news yesterday or the day before, know that the European Union have created this uh, vac vaccine buying agency, something of that sort, that will also be buying the vaccine when that comes out. So the question is, well, will the US and the EU be competing with one another? It's a different thing. And is this the start of boiling up this tension? Is this the small flames at the beginning? Is this the sparkles? At the end of the day, only time can tell. However, I think at the end of the day, when everything comes together, we will be working with each other if we also see a significant uh, competition coming from the east. And here I mean China, Asia, maybe also the Middle East, and Russia. So if we see that there is a competition coming from there, then the EU and the United States and also the UK, don't forget that, would be working with one another to get the vaccine, right? However, if we don't see any competition from the East, then we'll compete amongst each other because we know that the European countries will not be competing against each other, right? So it's going to be interesting what's going to happen when the vaccine actually comes. However, tensions that are building up today, if my interview with Dr. Abdallah was true, or at least the information that he gave about the process of creating a vaccine are true, well, in that case, the tensions today don't matter at all, right? Or at least in the long run, they don't matter because the vaccine will only be here in 4 years' time, right? 1 to 2 if it's a world record, but most likely after that. After that, yes. So with BBC, we have some vastly different news, right? Uh, you have something. Well, the main headline is about South Africa, and that there is a hostage situation at a church. I've not gone into depth with that article. You have something criticizing uh, Trump's approach. Um, you have something from Russia, that there's some protests over there, and then you have three three news about the Middle East, right? You have one criticizing Iran, which is quite interesting because we had Hamid Reza today, and he's also criticizing Iran and the way that they are doing, or I suppose, hiding up the true information, and also that they cannot afford a shutdown. That is also a significant conclusion from what he told us, right? Um, and secondly, we have the, the the news from yesterday with Turkey making Hagia Sophia a mosque instead of a museum, and we see that churches are now working against that, right? So the Church Association, as it says, the World Association of Churches, are working against that because for them it's a significant landmark. Um, so let's see how that works, if that will rise any more tension. Um, I don't know how strong this association for churches is. I've not got into depth with it, sadly, which would be interesting, I suppose. Uh, However, I don't think it's something that is worth fighting for. Maybe there would be some sanctions, but it's not. It's not something about fighting. It's not like Jerusalem, I suppose. Right? Um, it's. I don't think that it's seen as a holy site. It's just a significant thing. It's not a holy side of Christianity, right? Nothing real historical happened. Well, of course, something historical happened there, but not something that is essential for the Christian faith. And thirdly, you have something happening in Syria, that a British ISIS prisoner was killed. Um, and yes, that relates to, well, that makes us think again and remember all the prison fighters uh, that are held captive in Syria, and what is the real situation with them, right? How are they being treated? And what are we going to do about them? Are we just going to detain them for the rest of their lives? Are we going to have a hearing in a court with a judicial system, right, where where we'll be talking about the fate of these people, whether they will go to normal jail, right, or will they stay captive until the war is done? And then the question is, well, when is the war done? Is it and that's the thing, right? And yesterday we saw some tension with with China and Russia vetoing the decision to have aid coming in from the land borders, right, into Syria. So the conflict is still significantly in question. It's something that is still active, however, not something that is in the news. Now it is in the news, not a main headline, and it's difficult to say really what's going to happen, right? Because we say that all lives matter, but do these lives matter, right? That's the question. Because how you have it, right, is that a lot of these fighters that are imprisoned um, down there, right, and held captive, well, they're only held captive because they have a different kind of passport and they cannot be judged, put in the court system of Syria. So they are not Syrian. So what are you going to do? Well, you want to send them back. However, the EU doesn't want them. So what do? Well, you're not going to do something against them, because what if the EU changes their mind and they say we want our EU citizens back? You can't just judge them by your law. Then the question comes, well, what about international law? Well, then you have China and Russia working on one side and the US working on a different, so that's also not an option. So there's really a limbo here. Um, and it's a political game. Is it a question of time? I hope so. I really hope that there is a deadline for all of this. That at some point, and with deadline I mean that at some point all of this will be solved, right? But let's see tomorrow if this is going to be highlighted, right? Okay. So I think that is the end of the podcast. And as per usual, take care. Okay, let me just take care. Uh, I love you all, and I wish you all the best. However, as you know, as per usual, I don't just end the podcast like this. There's always a motivation at the end. And I think I will be taking the motivation that I was trying to maybe guide Hamid Reza towards, which was that you need something to drive you, right? Here goes. Some people have this internal motivation that they want to succeed, right? And if I have to put it in relation, well, to what we discussed today in the podcast, well, you have the motivation to have a lot of money, right? But at some point, that's gonna go away. At some point, you have enough. At some point, enough is enough. We've discussed that multiple times with the concave utility functions, and that you might be willing to, instead of material goods, you want some non-material goods, right? You want your utility to come from that, from leisure, something like that. So what so find the motivation, internal motivation. However, what do you do when you don't have the internal motivation? Well, then you try to find the external motivation. What is external motivation really, right? External motivation is anything outside your personal sphere that you care for. It's something that keeps you going. Maybe it's you have a dog at home that you need to take care of, right? And that gives you some motivation. At the morning, you wake up, you don't want to get out of bed. However, you need to feed this dog or this cat, this specific animal, and that gives you motivation in life, right? At least it gets you out of bed. That's a first start. Then you need to get food for this animal, and if you don't have money, you can't give food to this animal. Therefore, it motivates you to get a job and to earn some money. So that's a form of external motivation, right? Other external motivators, or at least let's keep it in the, could be your family. You want them to be proud of you. You want to make your family proud, right? The family name is strong. That's also a motivation that is acceptable. It's acceptable. It doesn't only need to be internal motivation, because that's a light, it's a feeling that can burn out, and it will come again. However, at times it might not exist. So your family might be your motivators. Your children might be a motivators, as we heard today, and as I've also heard from my own father, from my mother, and from her mother prior to that. So children are definitely a motivators. Whether it's to give them a perfect life, or for them, you want them to have a role model as yourself, that's also a motivation. It's an external motivation that keeps you going and keeps you to strive for the best version of yourself that you can be. However, motivation can also be macro, right? It can be that you want to make your nation proud, or your ethnicity proud. It can be that you want to make a change in the world. It's also an external motivator that might not have something to do with yourself. It's an intrinsic motivation in the sense that you want to make yourself best, and then therefore make their country better. However, it could also be that my country deserves more, or the people that live in my country deserves more, as we also heard today. That can also be a motivation to keep you going. It can be a motivation to also keep you striving for the best. So the motivation for today goes that if you don't have the internal motivation and the intrinsic motivation to keep on going forward, and try to find something external, because there's no shame in that. There's really no shame in that. The most important thing is the result at the very end, that you keep on moving forward, that the day ahead is better than the day that we've just left behind, and that today you're doing the best thing that you can do. You're living your utmost life. You're doing things that you believe in, and things that you believe is for the greater good. Maybe that's the external motivation that you really need. You're doing things for the greater good. Thank you very much for today. I love you all, and I hope that you've learned a lot from today. Otherwise, listen to tomorrow's podcast, because I will be summarizing what I talked about with Hamid Reza, and what Hamid Reza really talked to me about, right? What he opened up about. So take care. I love you all. As per usual, I'll keep my finger up until the podcast ends, such that I'm sure that you've actually got the ending.